So now that I've done Yamaha, I'm going to do Onkyo's products. I'm going to compare them within that company, and I think then in a separate video, I'll do Yamaha versus Onkyo and try to figure out, for my particular use case, which might be similar to yours, which brand and which model would be better. Uh, I'm not going to skip to the end just because I kind of have a lot to say and I want people to hear that just as much as the conclusion. I do have sort of one that I'm leaning towards, but I'll get to it. All right, so starting out with the Onkyo TX R7, nope, Onkyo TX RZ70 for $2,799. By the way, you'll notice there's a trend, like the Onkyo ones tend to be cheaper. They're supposedly less durable than the Yamaha ones, and Onkyo doesn't have as good customer support, but maybe that's survivorship bias. Like just because they sell more, so you'd expect them to have more failures. All right, so there's the RZ70 and then there's the RZ50. The TX RZ50 is $1,299. So you're talking about a price difference of $1,500. Yeah, which is pretty significant. The main things you get are the Z70 has 20 watts per channel more when it's driven in pairs. The Z70 has two more height channels. So, it's got 11 channels and then two for the subwoofer. So you're really paying a lot for those extra two channels. The Z70 has one more HDMI output than the Z50 does. I had written like Z70 has one more than the Z70 does. The Z50 actually has three more RCA inputs, audio inputs, than the Z50. The Z50 has 11.2 channel audio processing, but it doesn't have 11.2 channels. So basically what it's doing is it's taking the channels that would ordinarily, this is the same thing as everything else. It's just down mixing it to fewer channels. So you're not missing audio when you're going from 11 to 9 channels. As far as I can tell, the firmware on the Z50 has not made RO 3D available. The Z50 has one audio coax and the Z70 has two. None of Onkyo's receivers, as of the time that I'm making this video, support Cinema DSP. That's not a lot of differences for $1,500. I don't get it. The Z50, all right, so below the Z50 is the TX NR 7100. And it is the exact same price as the RZ50. Okay. The Z50 has 20 watts more per channel when driven in pairs. It might have better high current smoothing capacitors. It says it has 15K microfarads, but the 7100 doesn't say what all of its specs are. It might be in the manual. I don't care enough to look. The 7100 might not have the discrete output stage with the amp circuits. I still don't care enough to look it up. So yeah, the 7100 and the RZ50 are the same price. So I would just go with the RZ50 because newer. It's in a higher tier along with the RZ70. All right. So then below the TX NR 7100 is the TX NR 6100. It's $799, so price difference of $500. The 7100 in channel driven is the same as the 6100, but measuring by one channel driven, you get, I should be, here, let me just move this over here so I'm actually looking more at my camera. But measuring by one channel driven, you get 10 watts more per channel. The 7100 is IMAX certified. The 6100 isn't. So the IMAX thing, the IMAX enhanced thing, that has to do with an HDR mode. So, you know, if you want all the HDR stuff that's currently available, that's the one to get. Because it's got HDR10, HLG, no, it doesn't have DSP. I'm still going to have to do the comparison between brands for that one. It has HDR10 Plus, just regular old classic HDR. It's THX certified. The 7100 has D-rack room correction, or DIRAC. The 6100 does not, though. The 7100 has 9 channels. The 6100 has 7. The 7100 has independent tone controls for every channel. The 6100 just has it for the front 2 left and right channels. The 6100 doesn't have the bonus HDMI input in the front of the unit that the 7100 has. So it has 6 in total. And actually, I don't think the 6100 even has a panel that flips down like the 7100 does. Because it's got little controls on the top, or on the front, so you don't have to use a remote exclusively. The 6100 doesn't have I already read that. 6100 has 3 fewer analog RCA inputs. I don't know what you would be doing with that many. The 6100 doesn't have an RS-232C serial input or infrared repeater connector at all. The 7100 does. I don't know what an RS-232C serial input does. I assume it has something to do with maybe MIDI, or just connecting with a giant rack of audio equipment, that you can maybe control from some legacy device or a mixer or something. The 6100 doesn't have a detachable power cord. Why? Those are so much better than ones that are just like attached to it. Just because you can lose the cord or replace the cord, if yours becomes damaged, but good luck if, the one that's like permanently attached to it becomes damaged. I'd rather have something be as modular as possible, just for future repair's sake, because something's eventually going to die on that thing, and when it does, I'd like to be able to replace it. I mean, the reason why I'm shopping for an AV receiver right now is because my Sony DH520 has a dead HDMI card in it. I don't know what's, I opened it up and looked at it. All the capacitors are fine. So I don't know what's going on with it, and it's just beyond my level of expertise to fix, which is 0. My level of expertise with fixed electronics is 0. Like software stuff, I can kind of diagnose. Hardware stuff, I can kind of diagnose. But even for diagnosing the HDMI board being bad, I had to describe what was going on with it and ask other people. But if they made this thing modular, I could just go doot, like HDMI card is fixed now. But yeah, it's proprietary, so I'm just out of luck with that. The 6100 doesn't have Zone 3. The 7100 does. 6100 doesn't have composite, or S-video inputs. I think the 7100 does. It even has S video, which I like a lot. Does it? It does. It does. Let me check that real quick. Doot, 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 doot. Let's see, RZ70. No, RZ70 doesn't have it. 61 or RZ50 does not have it. Yeah, none of their things do. So never mind. Forget that's even a criteria. But it should be. Because I want to play every device that ever has been on this thing, including like the little TV clips, you know, like the little fork thingies that you plug into stuff on really old TVs. All right, where was I? Yeah, it doesn't have TV tuner coax on it either, so you can't watch TV through this thing, at least. You know, I guess you could go antenna, TV, eARC to this, to the, or just any HDMI into this, use that as your audio. So technically, yeah, you could. All right. But yeah, it's sad that the that the 6100 loses the composite and component video inputs completely. I mean, it couldn't have been that difficult. Like, maybe just a little bit of labor difference in order to remove that as a feature. The dynamic power for the 6100 is 10 watts lower for the 3, 4, and 8 ohm level. As far as I can tell for the rest of the stuff, it's at the same level for the rest of the models. Could be wrong about that. Don't care enough to check. The RCA output impedance for zone B is way higher on the 6100 at 2.2 kilo ohms versus the 7100's 470 ohms. So if you're putting stuff through that line, I think you'd be able to notice. At least it'd be more difficult to drive it as far as I understand how that works. The 6050 has 10 watts less per channel driven than the 6100, whether it's single or paired. The 6050 isn't THX certified, the 6100 is. They're really not that different. You're paying for a little better speaker driving with the 6100. The premium for that is $70 MSRP, because nope, it's not. It's $500 of a difference. No? Okay, just bear with me. The 6100 is $800. The 6050 is $630 or $630 MSRP. So that's a $70 difference. If you go up to the 7100, that's another $500. You know, so you're losing practically nothing by going from the $800 one down to the $630 one. So if it were me, I would choose the 650 over the 6100, and what you're about to hear is that the 5100 is significantly not as good as the 6050. So the 5100 is 35 watts less per channel as measured in single channel driven. It's 10 watts per channel less than 6050 measured by pairs driven. So we're all the way down to 80 watts per pair, which is on par with the lowest end Yamaha one. Just as a preview for how I'm going to compare that. So we've got something that's at the $600 level, which is above their lowest end of $450. So you got something that's $150 more, that has the same speaker driving power as the lowest end from Yamaha. Now keep in mind the lowest end from Yamaha is $650. The 5100 is $600. So just based on that, they're on par, but the Yamaha is more expensive for that same thing. So you're paying for, I would still pay the $50 for the durability, or reported durability. You're kind of going by reputation coming from other customers. And again, who knows how reliable those are. But to get back to the 5100 being not as good as the 6050 for multiple reasons, the 5100 has no Zone 2 at all. The 5100 loses 2 HDMI inputs and 1 analog RCA input. Who cares? It loses all but the left and it loses the front, left, and right banana plugs. So the front, left, and right banana plugs are still there. The rest are just clippies. The 5100 loses 8K upscaling. It just has 4K upscaling right now, so it's not future-proof. If you end up getting an 8K display sometime in the future, you're going to have to... It'll still play 8K material, right? But it's not going to do 8K upscaling, I think. Let me check real quick. See if the 5100 actually supports 8K. The 6100. Yeah, this 5100 came out in 2021, which means that the RXV line came out in 2022, which means the 2023 lineup hasn't even arrived yet. There you go. 2023 Onkyo lineup. All right, so these were announced in April. What are you talking about? Okay, so apparently the 2023, really? Onkyo, Integra, and Pioneer Elite are all owned by the same company. So apparently Pioneer has a lot of, look at that. The Pioneer Elite VSX LX 805 has a ton of ports on the back. Yeah, actually, this is going to be a headache. Okay, so apparently Integra is the high-end fancy stuff from that same company that has those sister companies. And they're the most expensive. But these things should already be out now, but I don't want to have to go through and re-go through all their players, but I might anyway, just because I feel the need to do that for everything. Anyway, the 5100 doesn't have VLSC filtering, and the 5100 doesn't have a phono port. The spec sheet doesn't list clip support, but it might have it since it's if its firmware has been updated since then. So if the price is right, go with the 6050. It's like a $30 difference between the 6050 and the 5100, which, if you're earning minimum wage and struggling to survive, go with 5100. But otherwise, go with everything else, anything higher than that. Going down to the 696, It's the TX-NR696. It gains back 45 watts in single channel driven and 20 watts as measured by paired channels over the 5100. So that's parallel with the 6100. The 696 only has HDCP 2.2. The 5100 has 2.3, but if you've got a 4K display, just forget about it. That does not matter. HDCP is 2.3 is the only thing that does is it makes it so that you can't play 2.0 content on a 1.4 HDMI 1.4 display. So it's just a check to make sure that your stuff is up to date enough to where it can actually play the content that you're trying to play on. It's not that it won't play back, it's just it won't play back at the desired resolution, which it couldn't do anyway because 1.4 doesn't have the bandwidth for that. So give it up. The 696 goes back up to 7 HDMI units, which is 3 more than the 5100, one of which is the front HDMI port that the 7100 lost, but the RZ50 has. It regained one analog RCA input and the phono input. It got Zone 2 back. The 696 got its banana plug ports back. And I'm talking about this as if it's past, as if the 696 is the most new one. The 696 is the old generation. The NR 6050, NR 5100, and so on. Those are the newer generation, and then I think I misspoke earlier. The RZ 70 and 50, those are the latest ones. And then latest is apparently the stuff from Integra. Because I didn't know that company existed, and if they did, I would have gone with that first. The biggest downside is that it doesn't support 8K at all. Like the 696 doesn't, the one below it doesn't. There is no 8K. I don't know how expensive 8K displays are. There's really no content available right now for 8K displays. It would be useful if you're gaming to have an 8K display. But in that case, you're not going to be might not be using it. I'm just going to drop that train of thought. Because that gets into the DisplayPort versus HDMI thing, and it's too broad of a topic to get into with a mini roundup like this. It doesn't support HDR10+, and it still doesn't support IMAX Enhanced, which you have to go all the way back up to 7100 for. So I'm not even considering getting one that has IMAX Enhanced because, I don't want to spend, $2,500 on their top of the line one. I can get 4 AV receivers for the price of that one. The 696 has even higher impedance on the RCA output and for the Zone B output. The 696 has 2.3 kiloohms. The 5100 has 2.2 kiloohms. I'd say go with the 6050 for its HDR 10 plus support, because I usually favor features over, quality of sound and all that stuff. There's just always the moving goalposts, and the creep for quality. You've got people that are spending tens and tens of thousands of dollars on trying to improve audio quality, and that's just not me. I don't want to go down that road. If I can get better features, for $100, $120, $130, for me at least, that's worth it. The difference between the 696 and the 6050 is that the 696 is $20 more expensive. And the reason why is because it's got better speaker driving power than the 6050 does. Um, the 696 and lower models have no e-arc, just regular arc. What that means is, even though the 696 has DTSX support, you can't use it in terms of passing it through, because the bandwidth for DTSX is higher than what regular ARC supports. If a device isn't supporting eARC, there's a good chance that the ports are only HDMI 2.0 instead of 2.1. And kind of sort of the only reason that you would want 2.1 is for very few things. I'll have to get into that in another video again, but at least for eARC, what that means is you don't have DTSX support. I don't know why they would have that as a supported thing within the firmware, but not have HDMI 2.1 ports, especially since HDMI 2.1 came out like 6 years ago, I think. It's well past being overdue. Maybe it has to do something to do with the chip that's in there. And maybe they're like, well, if we have to support 4K, we'd have to support 8K, and we don't want to do that for our lower end stuff. The 5100 and higher model spec sheets explicitly state that they have HDMI 2.1 ports and pass-through, so those work fine. You can use eARC and DTSX all day long if you want. The Onkyo TX SR 494 is $449, so it's $200 less than 696. The 494 drops back down to 50 watts less power rated by a single channel and 20 watts less than the 696 by a paired channel. So again, we're worse off than with the 5100, but only by 5 watts, measuring single channel. The 494 doesn't have THX certification. The 696 does. Again, the 494 doesn't have HDR10 Plus. You'd have to go up to the 5100 or 6050 for that. The 494 loses the front HDMI input, 2 rear HDMI inputs, and only has ARC, not eARC. The 494 loses the banana plug terminals again, with just the front stereo ones remaining, because the 696 did have the banana plugs back. Because it used to be the 696 was the, that was the top of the line one, at least from Onkyo. The 494 loses its phono ports and Zone 2 support. The 696 has front and height and surround back switching in stereo assign mode, which means you can swap around which ones are your stereo speakers if you move your TV or something. It has a higher signal to noise ratio at 109 decibels to the 696's 106 decibels coming from the line jack. So yeah, if you want to pay $200 more MSRP, you're getting better speaker power and Zone 2 support and not much else. The next thing that's lower than that is the 494. And I'm not going to cover that. So, if you want to pay for the cheapest possible setup, and you don't plan on playing DTSX audio, which, do I even have anything that's DTSX? No, I've got DTS HD Master. That's not DTSX. If you want the cheapest thing, the lowest end one is just price-wise is going to be Onkyo. But for for a more in-depth comparison, I'm going to have to sit here and compare them both side by side and go, all right, this one's got the better specs and this is what I can live with. Because out of all these, I don't have an HDR10 Plus display anyway, and I don't think I have an HDR10 Plus TV. So it might not really even matter. But at some point, I'm going to be getting a HDR10 monitor, and I want it to be compliant with the HDR10 Plus spec so that I can watch movies on my monitor in my room. It's going to be 4K. So I want it to have HDMI 2.1 if it's possible, if it's a choice. So the question is $450. Is that $180 worth it to get HDR10 Plus? Because I don't think I've got anything that's HDR10 Plus. Not in my collection. Let me check. Yeah, I don't even have any HDR10 Plus stuff, so I could probably live without it. But I really don't like the idea of getting something that doesn't have potentially doesn't have eARC support. But I can watch Blu-rays. I can watch all the stuff that I'm probably going to watch. With that support. Yeah, I don't think I really need HDR10 Plus. I think I can live without it. I don't think there's really any application for it right now. The only maybe thing that I would be using it for is if I had an application that would require higher brightness. So like sticking Game of Thrones maybe? Yeah, okay, so even like the notoriously difficult to watch Game of Thrones thing, the last season of that, it only has Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus. Nope. It has HDR10. Just HDR10. Not HDR10 Plus, just HDR10. Which means that this thing, which has some of the hardest to watch dark scenes, like people have seen in recent history, that's as good as it's going to get. HDR10 Plus is not going to add anything to it. $494 is already supported. It already supports Dolby Vision and HDR10. So far, just on those merits, within Onkyo, this is as good as it's going to get. Like, you don't really get any benefit from getting something with other stuff if you're just intending to watch 4K stuff. Not 8K. It's not future-proof. You're going to have to buy a new one later. So yeah. Out of all these, I would say, because I want to spend on a budget, I would go with the $494. It has all of these significant things that have been, made lately, and it's a big step up from what I've got, which is no Atmos, just ProLogic 2X, DTS HD Master instead of DTS X, and I think I've got like Neo 6 as the DCS thing. Just go with the cheapest one in this case. Which might end up being the one that wins out over the a RX, the one from Yamaha that's the cheapest one that I recommend. But we'll have to wait until the next video to find out. It's probably going to be a lot shorter, because I'm just comparing a handful of them.